Let's start where the pain began. The 1920s weren't just about leather helmets and small paychecks. This was the era when the NFL learned its first lesson about covering up scandals. In 1925, the Pottsville Maroons had their championship stolen from them in the league's first major controversy. They beat the Chicago Cardinals fair and square, but the NFL stripped their title for playing an exhibition game against Notre Dame. The real reason? Money and territorial rights. The league was already proving that rules meant nothing when profit was on the line. But the violence was the selling point. Players would show up drunk. Games turned into street fights. And nobody cared about long-term health because most guys wouldn't live long enough to worry about it. The NFL was marketing brutality as entertainment, and fans couldn't get enough. The 1930s brought the first glimpse of what would become the league's signature move, sweeping problems under the rug. Players were getting seriously hurt, but there was no medical protocols, no safety standards, just raw violence packaged as sport. Then came the 1940s, and suddenly the NFL had a bigger problem. World War II took away half their talent, and the league nearly collapsed. But instead of folding, they did what they'd always do: adapt, exploit, and keep the money flowing. The post-war NFL wasn't just rebuilding, it was engineering a new kind of brutality. The league merged with rivals, expanded rapidly, and started the systematic transformation of human beings into colliding projectiles. This is when the real damage started. Players were getting bigger, faster, and hitting harder. The introduction of the forward pass meant more violent collisions at higher speeds. But here's what they don't tell you. The NFL already suspected that this was causing brain damage. In the 1960s, team doctors were quietly documenting symptoms that looked suspiciously like what we now know as CTE. Players were showing up confused, aggressive, unable to remember their families. But instead of investigating, the league buried the reports and told players to walk it off. Vince Lombardi's Green Bay Packers weren't just winning championships, they were perfecting the art of strategic violence. The Lombardi sweep wasn't just a play call, it was a collision designed to inflict maximum damage. And the league loved it because violence sold tickets. Meanwhile, the first whispers of a gambling scandal emerged. Players were getting mysterious phone calls. Games had suspicious momentum swings, and the league's response was always the same: deny, deflect, destroy the evidence. But fans were eating it up. Television was making the NFL a national obsession, and every brutal hit was being replayed in slow motion. The league had found its formula: market the violence, hide the consequences, and never stop counting the money. The AFL-NFL merger wasn't just about creating one league. It was about monopolizing the violence. Now, there was nowhere else for players to go, which meant the NFL could treat them however they wanted. And they wanted them broken. The decade saw the birth of the NFL's most sinister creation, the Mild Traumatic Brain Injury Committee. In 1994, they'd officially formed this committee, but the groundwork was being laid in the 70s. The NFL was already studying brain damage, not to prevent it, but to figure out how much they could hide. The Pittsburgh Steelers' steel curtain defense wasn't just dominant, they were deliberately targeting heads. Jack Tatum's hit on Darryl Stingley in 1978 left Stingley paralyzed for life. The NFL's response? They ruled it a clean hit and kept selling the violence. But behind closed doors, team doctors were reporting an epidemic of cognitive problems. Players in their 30s were developing dementia, having memory blackouts, and showing signs of severe depression. The NFL solution was to transfer these doctors to different teams or fire them entirely. The league also faced its first major gambling crisis. Rumors swirled that games were being fixed, that certain players were in the pocket of organized crime. When Chuck Noll mentioned a criminal element in the NFL, He wasn't just talking about dirty hits, he was exposing a culture of corruption that went to the very top. The 1980s NFL was running on cocaine, steroids, and silence. Players were dying, but nobody was allowed to connect the dots. This was the era when NFL players started dying by suicide at alarming rates. But here's the twisted part: the league knew why. Internal memos from this period, later revealed in lawsuits, showed team doctors describing symptoms identical to what we now know as CTE. But instead of helping players, the NFL created a culture of fear where speaking up meant losing your career. Mike Webster was football's Iron Man, but by the 1990s, he was homeless, tasering himself just to fall asleep. His brain was deteriorating in real time, and when he tried to get help from the NFL, they cut off his benefits and pretended he didn't exist. Meanwhile, the league was dealing with its first major drug scandal. Players were overdosing, getting arrested, and the NFL's response was to create a public relations machine designed to bury bad news. They weren't solving problems, they were just getting better at hiding them. The violence was escalating too. Lawrence Taylor's career was built on deliberate attempts to injure opponents. His hit on Joe Theismann wasn't an accident. It was the logical conclusion of a league that rewarded players for ending careers. But the most disturbing part? The NFL was secretly funding research into brain damage while publicly denying any connection between football and cognitive problems. They knew what they were doing to those men, and they kept doing it anyway. The salary cap era didn't just change how teams built rosters, it changed how they disposed of damaged players. Now, there was a financial incentive to hide injuries and rush players back onto the field before their brains could heal. This is when the NFL's cover-up became systematic. They hired their own scientists, funded their own studies, and created their own medical committees, all designed to produce research that absolved the league of responsibility. Dr. Bennett Amalu discovered CTE in 2005, but the NFL didn't just deny his findings, they tried to destroy his career. They demanded his research be retracted, questioned his credentials, and used their influence to have him blacklisted from medical conferences. Meanwhile, players were dropping like flies. Andre Waters, Terry Long, Justin Strelzik, all suicides, all later found to have severe CTE. But the NFL's response was always the same. These were isolated incidents with no connection to football. The Brett Favre concussion situation exposed just how far the league would go. Favre was playing with severe cognitive problems, admitting years later that he couldn't remember entire seasons. But the NFL not only allowed it, they celebrated it as toughness. Then came Spygate and Deflategate, proving that cheating wasn't just tolerated in the NFL, it was expected. If teams were willing to break rules for minor competitive advantages, what were they willing to do when billions of dollars were at stake? Junior Seau's suicide in 2012 should have been the moment everything changed. He shot himself in the chest just to preserve his brain for research, leaving behind a note that essentially accused the NFL of murder. But even then, the league kept lying. The 2013 concussion settlement was supposed to compensate brain-damaged players, but it became another tool of deception. The NFL designed the settlement to deny as many claims as possible, using medical loopholes and racial bias to avoid paying out money they legally owed. Here's the most disgusting part. They were using race norming in cognitive tests, making it harder for black players to qualify for benefits. In a league that's 70% black, they were literally discriminating against the majority of their workforce. The settlement promised $765 million, but a recent investigation found that they denied hundreds of legitimate claims from players who died with confirmed CTE. they were still prioritizing profit over human lives. And the violence keeps escalating. Hits are harder than ever, concussions are more frequent, and players are still being pressured to play through brain injuries. The only difference is that now they have better lawyers. Tua Tagovailoa's concussion saga in 2022 proved nothing has really changed. He was clearly concussed against Buffalo, cleared to return, then nearly died 4 days later against Cincinnati. The NFL's response? They fired the independent neurologist and changed the protocols to make them even less protective. Today's NFL generates $18 billion annually by selling brain damage as entertainment. Every tackle you see, every big hit that gets replayed, every football move that draws applause, it's all contributing to an epidemic of cognitive destruction that the league continues to minimize. CTE has been found in 345 of 376 deceased NFL players who've been studied. That's a 92% rate. But the NFL still won't admit that playing football causes brain damage. They hide behind phrases like more research is needed, while funding studies designed to muddy the waters. The league has perfected the art of public relations warfare. They'll fine players for celebrating touchdowns, but not for hits that cause concussions. They'll suspend someone for 4 games for deflating footballs, but allow players with domestic violence convictions to keep playing. And the scandals keep coming. From Dan Snyder's financial crimes to ongoing gambling partnerships that create obvious conflicts of interest. The NFL has become a criminal enterprise disguised as a sport. But here is what really should terrify you. They're expanding internationally, targeting kids in other countries who don't understand the long-term costs. They're not just destroying American lives anymore, they're going global with their violence machine. Here's the truth they never want you to realize. The NFL isn't a sports league. It's a systematic exploitation of human bodies for profit, wrapped in patriotism and sold as entertainment. Every era we've covered has the same pattern: escalating violence, corporate cover-ups, and treating players as disposable products. The names change, the technology improves, but the fundamental business model remains the same. Find desperate men, destroy their bodies and brains, then discard them when they become inconvenient. The league has spent 50 years perfecting the art of hiding brain damage while maximizing the collisions that cause it. They've turned traumatic brain injury into primetime television and convinced an entire country that this is normal. So what are you going to do with this information? You can keep pretending that what you're watching is just a game. You can convince yourself that these men understand the risks and make their own choices. Or you can acknowledge the truth that every time you watch, every time you buy a jersey, every time you attend a game, you're funding a machine designed to destroy human brains for profit. The NFL will keep evolving, keep finding new ways to hide the damage, and keep convincing people that the violence is just part of the game. But now, you know better. The question isn't whether football causes brain damage. That debate is over. The question is whether you're comfortable being entertained by systematic human destruction. That's the real history of the NFL. Not the sanitized version they sell on Sunday, but the blood-soaked reality of America's most profitable form of organized violence. The choice is yours. And if you want to see more content exposing the dark truth behind America's favorite sport, make sure you subscribe to NFL Pain Tapes, because somebody has to tell you the stories they don't want you to hear.